everybody, welcome. It's layout update time. Today we're going to cover January and part of February. So let's start off with a reference here. This is where I started January 1st. Now we're overlooking Summit Lake. This is just inside the BC border, across from Alberta. The entire work window for January basically consisted of trying to get this section done across Crowsnest. This is the front wall of the house is about 12 feet. 10-12 feet long. You can see no backdrop work done. I wanted to really get this taken care of so that I could progress further along Island Lake, which is what I renovated in the last update vid. So this is about 16 inches wide. You can see that Highway 3 is directly up against the backdrop here. There's a slope down to the tracks. Pretty proto-specific, so I had to really nail this to get the feel of the area. Of course, Highway 3, the bridge on the right-hand side, curves to the wrong direction here. So artistic license was applied here to get the backdrop to fit in the area properly. I knew the way the scene was modeled that I could be really accurate with the backdrop above the Island Lake area to the east of the Highway 3 bridge. So what I did was use that as a reference point, printed off some street view images of the area. You can see Highway 3 climbing up on the left-hand side, and determined that I kind of had to unfold this mountain to get the scene above Crowsnest painted accurately. An overhead view of the area gave me an idea of what I had to do to get things to blend together west of the Highway 3 bridge. But of course, first I had to get the old backdrop prepped and ready to go. Now I'm not a sentimental guy, and that's a good thing because the palm sander made quick work of the first backdrop that I'd ever painted 20 plus years ago. Of course, that was followed with rolling on some light blue paint and blending some dark blue in with a brush to give it some atmosphere. Let it dry overnight, and I was soon on the distant mountains and trees. Highway 3 above Crowsnest was built using the cut and fill method, and I really wanted to make sure I established that cut on the backdrop before I started painting the tree lines and working my way back down towards the highway. With backdrop work progressing, I took a step back just to see how the entire scene was coming together. Now overall I was happy with what was going on behind the tracks, but not real happy with what was going on in the foreground. Now Crowsnest used to be a service facility for steam locomotives back in the day, so it had all of that kind of equipment there, turntable, water tanks, oil tanks, coal tower, that kind of thing. The profile of the fascia just didn't represent the area properly. So out came the speed square and the OLFA, and I cut out a section of fascia between my switch control panels, hoping I wasn't going to have to pull them out. I quickly tacked up some new fascia and determined it wasn't enough to get the look I was going for. So out came the panels, and they ended up putting in about 48 inches of new fascia to bring the profile up to better represent the area. With the new profile established, the fascia filled and sanded, it was time to get the scenery in behind the fascia filled in. Now I know this is a lot of effort to go to for a flat spot, but I'm trying to be as prototypically accurate in the area as I can. And as far as the fascia goes, I look at a layout as three-dimensional art, and the fascia is the frame. I want to make sure that I spend the time to do the fascia properly so I get the most visual bang for the buck when it comes to layout presentation. With the styrofoam in place, cut down and shaped with a rasp, I was soon smearing siliclay over top of everything. Now I'd had to cut right into the existing bank along the lake here, so I paid special attention to make sure I got a good joint and a seamless blend. I also took the time to add kind of a little feature, kind of an eroded hillside here at the end of the lake to give the area some extra interest. I gave the siliclay a good day to dry up, so when I started going at the backdrop again, I wouldn't be dragging my elbows through the wet material. Of course, I modeled the fall, so it was important that I get some aspens painted on the backdrop. I painted some additional foreground fir trees just to kind of blend everything together, just in time to head south to the Portland area to attend some operating sessions with friends. Now there's direct flights from Calgary to Portland, but what fun is that? I decided to point the truck south and catch the Empire Builder out of Shelby. Much to my surprise, Amtrak arrived half an hour early, so I had some time to just sit on the platform, do a little rail fanning before getting on the train. Dinner before Browning, some great lounge car conversation while dropping down Marias Pass, and into bed before Whitefish. After dragging my butt out of bed at Pasco, we were soon crossing the Columbia River. Now normally I would text at this time to let my ride know when the train was going to arrive. However, that wasn't necessary, as my ride was the engineer on today's train from Pasco into Portland, so there was no chance I was going to get forgotten at the station. With the sun coming up and us hugging the Washington side of the Columbia, gave me time to think about all the different Amtrak trips that I've taken. And this run down the old Spokane, Portland, Seattle ranks right up there at the top of my list. Saturday saw us over at my friend Rob's place operating on his Tennessee Pass layout. Unfortunately, the throttle kept him busy and I didn't get any video. I did manage to sneak in before the op session though and take this overview shot of Minturn and of course the S curves at Mitchell, the east side of the Tennessee Pass Tunnel, and Malta, where the Colorado and Southern Leadville branch came down to meet the Rio Grande Main. On Sunday, we were over at another friend, Rick's Columbia River Gorge layout, depicting the line between Wishram and Vancouver, Washington. Rick also has a staging yard representing Bend, Oregon, and Carl and I drew a train from there, bound for Vancouver, Washington, behind Western Pacific F units. Now, one of the things I really appreciate about both these layouts is the recognizable scenes. Having spent time in Tennessee Pass in 2005 and a few days prior coming down the gorge on Amtrak. I try to take my business car along when I visit friends and operate on their layouts. Unfortunately, in the excitement, I forgot to take it over to Rob's place. Luckily, a special passenger move showed up on the timetable at the end of Rick's op session, and I got to go for a ride down the gorge from Wishram to Vancouver. All too soon the weekend was over and it was down to the Vancouver station to catch Amtrak Cascades up to Seattle. With an hour or so to kill after arriving at King Street, I went searching for a coffee and of course hopped upstairs to take a picture of the station. I then jumped across the street to get a shot of Union Station. This is where Milwaukee Road and Union Pacific passenger trains called back in the day. Back at King Street, it turned out that there was problems with the power on the train, and we're going to have to wait for a BNSF freight unit to drag us up over top of the pass. That just gave me the opportunity to watch the parade of Sounders heading south. We finally got out of King Street 3.5 hours late. Of course, late trains can present opportunities. In this case, daylight running between Bonner's Ferry and Libby along the Kootenay River. After breakfast and a trip through the Flathead Tunnel, we arrived at Whitefish, Montana. Now pressing east, the snow was getting thicker as the elevation changed and we soon reached the base of Marias Pass. Now this is Essex, Montana, of course, and this ranks right at the top of my list for railfan destinations. This is about 4 hours from my front door, and of course this is the location of the Isaac Walton Inn. I've spent probably 24 nights at the Isaac Walton as well as several nights in the F-45. This is a fantastic place to just sit back and watch trains. We popped in and out of the snow sheds that this part of the High Line is famous for as we climbed steadily up towards the Continental Divide in a lightly falling snow. Every so often, reminders of the original route over the pass showing themselves. Shelby came quick once we got out of the mountains. I shot the power on the train, fueled the truck, turned north for the border, and I was soon on my way home. As the sun dropped behind the distant mountains as I rolled through Fort Macleod on Highway 3, I was really starting to look forward to getting home and working on my own version of the highway. After a much better night's sleep in my own bed versus the roomette the night before, I was up the next morning to get started on the highway project. The section I was putting in here was 8 feet long and I didn't want any joints, so I decided to use 1/8 inch hardboard as the material of choice. I used a palm sander, trying to establish a bit of a crown, and then sealed it up with drywall primer with a little bit of my Fascia black mixed in, hoping to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and get a decent color in 1 coat. After the paint dried up, I masked off the outer white lines and gave them a quick pass with the airbrush. Now, one thing I've noticed about modeled roadways is that people tend to paint their lines too wide, so I paid special attention to get them as narrow as possible while still being noticeable. With the tape off, I made a quick pass down the center of each lane with a thin wash to represent weathering from traffic. And with a little bit more detail work done, it was time to set the road in place using wood glue and a little weight to make sure things didn't shift. Now, all the recent images I've been looking at showed K-barrier along the shoulder of the highway. I had BLMA K-barrier in stock, but only about half of what I would need to complete the project. Fortunately, when I was researching the bridge that crosses the tracks, I noticed that there was steel barrier down at that end. So I went for a street view drive and realized Alberta uses steel barrier, and right at the border with BC it changes to K-barrier. I had 3 packages of Gold Medal Models etched metal steel barrier in stock, and combined with the K-barrier, that'd give me enough material to finish the project. I built up all 3 packages of the etched metal guardrails using wooden posts instead of relying on the steel. Gave me about 40 inches of guardrail to install. With the steel barrier in place and setting up, I painted and weathered up the K-barrier and went about installing it from the border west into BC. With the guardrail in place, I turned my attention to some of the smaller details, like the grade crossing for the Crowsnest access road. I set the work train up to do the last little bit of ballasting behind the track before finishing the scenery between the tracks and Highway 3 itself. I then raided the stockpile of trees I built last summer. I ended up poking about 350 into the scenery base here. I was pretty happy with progress to this point, so it seemed like a good time to clean some track, do a quick vacuum, and run the first revenue train through here. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you know that I've been working on this Crowsnest area for nearly 2 years. It's very rewarding to get it to this stage. Of course, there's still more layers to go, there always is. Foreground scenery has to be taken care of, and I'm slowly pushing my way towards the Highway 3 bridge. In fact, that's the next project I want to get done, as it's a natural demarcation between the Crowsnest area and the Island Lake area. That's pretty much a wrap on this one. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you like what you see, don't forget to like and subscribe. Or if you want even more detailed videos covering what I'm up to, consider becoming a channel member. Currently, there's 60 plus videos available, including 6 just covering the backdrop through this area, and I'm constantly adding more. Till the next video, everyone, happy modeling.